Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're on a mission specifically for you, our listener, because, well, you sent us a massive stack of notes.
Oh, a huge stack.
Mm.
And it's centered around this incredibly striking, really beautiful allegorical text.
Right? It's titled The Curse, Why They Disconnect from Her. And when you sent these over, you highlighted this profound tension between vulnerability and safety that the text explores.
Yeah, and just to be clear right out the gate, we are not looking at a historical document today.
No, definitely not.
Or, some rigid religious dogma. What you've shared with us is this breathtaking, almost poetic exploration of human connection.
And really the massive invisible walls we build to protect ourselves from intimacy.
It truly is a masterpiece of psychological insight. I mean, it's wrapped in the language of myth, but the way it sets up the central problem of human connection is just brilliant.
It really is.
Because it starts by completely redefining what we are actually afraid of.
Yes. And that is the exact paradox that hooked me when reading your notes. Because usually when we think about our deepest fears, we picture things that are actively threatening.
Like judgment or rejection.
Exactly. We imagine like standing on a stage, completely exposed, while an audience aggressively points out every single one of our flaws.
Right. We assume the classic nightmare is being found lacking, that our greatest fear is being deemed unworthy.
But the text flips that completely. It basically asks, well, what if that's a misdirection?
Mm-hmm.
What if the absolute most terrifying thing in the world isn't being judged at all? What if the thing that truly shatters our psychological defenses is being completely unconditionally accepted?
Which sounds totally counterintuitive. Almost impossible to believe on a surface level, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone says they want unconditional love.
Exactly. But as we'll see from a psychological standpoint, unconditional acceptance is actually an existential threat to a certain kind of ego. And the text illustrates this by taking us back to a conceptual age before the walls, before the disconnection.
And the scene it sets is just incredibly vivid. It introduces us to this presence, the goddess named Amma, but she's not floating on a golden cloud throwing lightning bolts.
No, she wasn't an apparition. The text explicitly says she was a neighbor.
A neighbor, I love that.
Right, she sat on stones and roots. She didn't have a throne or like an army. She carried nothing, but she gave everything.
And there's this incredible detail you pointed out in the source material.
Oh, about the grasses.
Yes. When she walked, the grasses didn't just bend under her feet. They actually turned toward her like listening ears.
It's so poetic. And even her name, Amma, it wasn't some formal title bestowed by high priests.
Right. It was just the natural mother sound the human tongue makes when you open your throat to invite warmth inward.
Just Amma. It's so simple. But we need to clarify something about this paradise she lived in.
Yeah, let's unpack this because the text paints this picture of paradise, but it makes a very careful distinction here.
Right.
This paradise wasn't about immortality.
Right.
It wasn't about endless banquets of food or living forever without physical pain.
Not at all. The defining characteristic of this paradise was a single word, and that word is contact.
Contact.
Yeah. It was the pure experience of being genuinely received, of being known entirely and knowing that you were known without a single ounce of fear or holding back.
Which is so rare for us now.
Exactly. Amma moved through the world with this total, unshakable curiosity. She noticed the architecture of a honeycomb, the mood of a river before rain.
Even the exact way a child's laugh changes between the ages of 3 and 5.
Yes. She was interested in everyone, specifically and wholly.
So if that's paradise, this total loving contact, how do we lose it? The text introduces two very different human reactions to Amma's absolute presence to explain this, right?
Saren and Call.
Yeah, those two are central. Let's look at Saren first. She's not a warrior. She's not a mystic. She's just an ordinary young woman grinding grain and gathering herbs.
But Saren has one defining trait that sets her apart in the narrative. She doesn't look away from Amma's gaze.
She holds it.
She does. And the text makes it clear that this gaze was heavy. It wasn't just a fleeting, polite glance. Amma's eyes held everything, as a witness, not as a judge.
And when we say everything, the text gives these incredibly piercing examples. Like when Amma looked at Saren, she saw the grief Saren had swallowed at age 12 and never spoken of.
She saw the time Saren lied to her sister and, convinced herself it was out of kindness.
And she even saw this overwhelming, enormous tenderness Saren had for an old dog.
Oh, that part is so moving.
It is. A tenderness so big, it actually frightened Saren, probably because loving something that much makes you terrifyingly vulnerable to losing it.
And all of it was visible to Amma. And Saren just lets herself be completely undone by this gaze for 3 days. She just weeps.
3 whole days.
Yeah, but the text is clear here. She isn't weeping out of sadness or shame. She is weeping out of release.
Right.
It's the sheer neurological relief of not having to carry the weight of her secrets anymore.
She just comes out lighter. And then there's this stunning moment by the river where Saren and Amma are talking, and there's a heron standing in the shallows watching them.
Oh, I love the imagery there.
Saren says to Amma, they think the seeing means you find them wanting.
And Amma's response is essentially the thesis of this entire deep dive today. She says, the seeing is the finding. There is nothing else to find.
Bro.
And then she delivers this line. She says, they mistake the act of being revealed for the act of being judged. They do not understand that revelation and acceptance are the same gesture.
Revelation and acceptance are the same gesture. I mean, I had to read that line 3 times. It's so beautiful. But then we have call.
Yes, call. The contrast is sharp.
If Saren represents release, call represents, like, the ultimate ancient example of imposter syndrome.
Oh, absolutely. He's the guy who wakes up every single morning, an hour early, just to quietly mentally rehearse why he deserves to exist.
Exactly. He builds this daily internal case for his own worthiness. The text mentions he failed his brother 20 years ago.
Right, he's made selfish choices, so he survives by hiding his failures, overcompensating, and just obsessively curating his image.
His entire psychological architecture is built on managing how others perceive him.
Totally.
So wait, I'm struggling with what happens next. When Amma looks at Call, at this firelit gathering, she sees his curated image disintegrate.
Right, she sees through it instantly.
She sees the failed brother, the withheld love, all of it. And she doesn't recoil. She doesn't judge him.
Not at all.
Logically, if someone sees every terrible thing I've ever done and accepts me anyway,
Yeah.
my reaction wouldn't be to run away. It would be sheer relief. So why on earth does Call experience this as a crisis?
Well, what's fascinating here is that we have to look at the cognitive load of how Call has constructed his identity. If your entire sense of self, your motivation, your daily habits, your internal monologue, if all of that is built on the foundation of defending yourself against judgment,
Right.
what happens when the threat of judgment is permanently removed?
Oh, I guess you lose your foundation.
You lose your entire reality. It causes severe psychological vertigo. Unconditional love basically deletes his ego.
That's wild.
He expected a mirror of his own harshness, right? Because that's the world he understands. He expected punishment, which would actually validate his self-hatred.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Instead, he got the undeflectable presence of love. She saw him completely and didn't find him insufficient. He had no framework for that.
None.
It was an absolute existential threat to the person he had spent 20 years pretending to be.
That's a terrifying thought, actually. That the thing we say we want most unconditional love is the thing we might be fundamentally wired to deflect because it requires the death of our curated self.
Exactly. So Call runs, he leaves the gathering, and this individual fear snowballs into a universal curse.
So how does one man's fear become a curse for everyone?
The birth of the curse happens weeks later. It's late at night, a fire is burning down to coals. Call is there with a dozen adults, and he finally voices this terrifying feeling of vertigo.
What does he say?
He says she sees too much. He tells them, we are not strong enough for it.
And Saren is there. She's sitting in the shadows.
Yes, she is.
She knows he's wrong. She knows that trembling feeling isn't a sign to run away. It's a sign to stay and let the ego die.
Right.
But she stays silent because she's afraid of the group's reaction. A silence she apparently never forgives herself for.
And in her silence, the pact is made. And this is a crucial distinction in the sources you provided. The curse wasn't an angry lightning bolt from a punitive god.
Right. It wasn't a punishment from above.
No, it was a communal sigh, a collective giving of permission to look away. It was born from exhaustion.
They were just tired.
Exactly. These were worn-out people who needed the dark not to commit evil, but just to be unobserved. The cognitive load of being completely seen was just too high for them. They couldn't separate being seen from being judged, so they chose to be unseen.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it completely flips how we view human history. After this night, Call starts building a narrative to justify his running away.
He has to rationalize it.
Right. He tells himself it's actually respectful to keep his distance from the divine. So he builds a small altar in his home. He gets on his knees at a scheduled time every morning, closes his eyes, and prays with carefully arranged words. Are we really saying that prayer and devotion here are actually sophisticated forms of avoidance?
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes everything about how we view societal structures.
Yeah.
Yes, the text is arguing that Call convinced himself distance was reverence.
That is mind-blowing.
By scheduling his interaction with the sacred, he controlled it. He stopped feeling the vertigo of exposure.
It makes you wonder if our natural instinct is to build these massive structural temples to keep love at a safe distance. How does anything pure ever reach us? It feels like an impossible stalemate. We desperately need the contact, but we are terrified of the exposure. So what does Amma do? Does she just leave?
This is where the allegory becomes incredibly poignant. She doesn't get angry, she doesn't abandon them, but she understands they can no longer tolerate her direct, unfiltered presence.
It reminds me of the mechanics of a solar eclipse.
Oh, how so?
Well, you can't look directly at the sun during an eclipse, right?
Yeah.
The intensity will literally burn your retinas.
Right.
So you take a piece of cardboard, you poke a tiny hole in it, and you build a pinhole projector. You look at a tiny, manageable projection of the sun on the sidewalk. You're still seeing the sun, but indirectly safely.
That is exactly the mechanism Amma employs. The text says she became small enough to be born.
I love that phrasing.
She didn't diminish her power. She just folded her vastness into indirect threads. She pressed her presence into every form that human beings could touch without triggering that terrifying call-like vertigo.
The examples the text gives for these pinholes are stunning. Like, she became the specific quality of morning light on the second day after rain.
Yes. Think about the psychology of awe. When the world is so clean, it looks like a first draft of itself, and you step outside and just breathe it in.
Oh, that feeling is the best.
In that split second, your ego drops. If you let that light actually touch you, you feel, however briefly, the quality of being received by the universe. Something is glad you exist.
And she became music. The sensation in your chest when a melody perfectly matches an unarticulated emotion.
Mm-hmm.
When for 3 seconds, the distance between your complicated interior life and the outside world just collapses.
It's powerful. She also became the terrifying weightlessness of holding a child who completely trusts you.
Why a child specifically?
Because an infant doesn't judge. You can let your guard down entirely. People could receive unconditional love from a child when they could no longer tolerate receiving it directly from her.
Wow. The notes you sent also mention she became human myths. The text lists them as these partial doors, like Inanna descending into the underworld,
Or Demeter searching the earth for her daughter in grief.
Saraswati representing intellect and art, Papahanaumoku birthing the Hawaiian Islands.
Each of those myths acts as a psychological pinhole. Like Inanna descending into the dark underworld is a way for humans to process Amma's empathy for our darkest, most shameful parts without having to face her directly.
Right.
We project our need for love onto the story of Demeter. We use these myths to interact with fragments of her real face, projected safely so we can look at it without trembling.
But the text notes a profound tragedy here. This was Amma's genius, that humanity kept encountering her and being healed by her through rivers and music and myths. But it was also her deepest wound.
Because an indirect thread can only do so much. It keeps the ember of connection lit, but it doesn't bring you home.
Right, like a beautiful song can remind you that you have a soul, but a song can't look at the darkest, most hidden parts of your past and accept them.
Exactly.
Only the direct gaze can reach through all those carefully constructed layers of self-protection to the deepest, unwounded part of the self and say, you are still here. Come and see.
Yeah, she wanted full contact for their sake, because she knew indirect threads would never fully cure the loneliness.
That is the tragedy. She lacks nothing, but she suffers the grief of watching them settle for breadcrumbs when the little loaf is waiting for them.
It's heartbreaking.
So we have this curse of distance deeply embedded in the human psyche. If we're waiting for a resolution, I feel like we're conditioned by stories to expect a dramatic cinematic climax.
Like a huge battle or something.
Yeah. The skies crack open, a grand revelation occurs, the temples crumble, and everyone suddenly understands. Does Amma eventually, kick down the door?
Not at all. She waits with active patience. The text compares her waiting to the patience of geology.
Geology is so incredibly slow.
Yes. She knows that neurological learning, the unlearning of fear, has to be grown, and growing takes exactly as long as it takes.
Wow.
Her grief over the disconnection falls as rain, blessing the earth simply because her nature is to bless. The text points out that fire is hot not by decision, but by nature.
Right, it just is.
She cannot turn off the love, so she just remains as a gentle, ceaseless presence at every closed door.
So what does this all mean for the unraveling of the curse? If there's no grand doctrine or thunder's event, how do these massive psychological walls actually come down?
The unraveling happens in tiny, radically ordinary spaces.
Really?
Yeah. It happens without priests, without ceremonies, and without grand pronouncements. It is simply the cessation of effort, the literal neurological laying down of the heavy, exhausting labor of not looking.
And the examples are so grounded in everyday reality. Like, it happens when a mother looks at her child, and instead of hiding from the terrifying enormity of how much she loves them by busying her brain with logistics and to-do lists.
Which we all do.
Right, instead of doing that, she just stops. She drops the cognitive load and lets the enormity of the love just be the thing.
Or it happens when a person is in the middle of profound suffering. Usually we build complex narratives around our pain.
Like who's to blame, what it means about our worth.
Exactly, how it proves we are unlucky. But occasionally someone just drops the narrative and stays in the raw feeling. And when they stop fighting it, they discover that inside the suffering is something quiet, intact, and totally indestructible.
I love that. The text also mentions a person just standing in front of a mirror, not out of vanity, but out of a willingness to just look.
Just witnessing themselves.
Right. Looking at themselves until the inner critical voice simply gets exhausted and gives up, outlasted by the simple, unarguable fact of existing.
It's profound.
In those totally ordinary moments, when someone finally stops managing their image and lets themselves be seen, Amma doesn't throw a parade.
She just does what she has always done. She receives them completely. She finds them whole, irreducibly themselves.
And that is how the curse unravels.
Not with a bang, but with a quiet sigh of release.
Which brings us to the beautiful coda of the text you shared with us. It leaves us with this lingering image of a young girl at a river. She's maybe 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, it's that specific age where the heavy veil of societal compliance hasn't fully descended yet, but she can feel it coming.
She can feel the adults around her starting to look at her with expectations.
Subtly telling her who to be and what to hide.
But right in this moment, she is just sitting with her feet in the cold river water. And she feels the light hitting the surface, and she feels a presence looking at her.
She doesn't have the theological words for it.
No, she doesn't know it's a divine gaze. She just knows in her bones that she feels entirely loved without having to earn it.
And she takes that visceral feeling and she pockets it like a warm stone.
A warm stone.
A tactile memory to carry into the difficult, heavily armored years of adulthood that are approaching. A reminder of direct contact to hold on to when the curse of distance feels permanent.
It's an incredible image to leave us with.
It really is. And I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought building on this. Think about your own life. Where are you putting up a wooden idol or constructing respectful distance to avoid being truly seen by the people you love?
Oof, that's a hard question.
Right. What would happen if just for a moment you stopped managing the impression you make, put down the heavy labor of not looking, and allowed yourself to be entirely witnessed exactly as you are?
It fundamentally changes how you view yourself and your relationships. If you're listening to this, I hope you can find that warm stone of presence in your own pocket today. Remember, you don't have to be perfectly curated to be worthy of the light. You just have to endure the vertigo of laying down your armor. Thank you for sending in these amazing sources, and thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, and maybe let yourself be found.